for our own path? Is it about luck? And I know I heard just a moment ago on the other side, especially for the women who choose this industry, that the things that you're subjected to. And one thing I want to address right now is you do not have to put yourself in front of sexual harassment. You do not ever have to deal with that. That is something that I dealt with. That is something that I dealt with more than I would care to even start to explain. But we are no longer in a space where men or women have to subject themselves to work situations that are not acceptable. And do not be afraid to speak up and to protect yourself and to protect the integrity of your job to continue to moving forward in this industry, period. We should never be discriminated against or treated differently for the way that we look, the way that we talk, or even the way that we think about certain things, as long as it does not infect the integrity of the work that we are trying to bring forward. I started out attending Troy University. I thought I wanted to be a print journalism major. I had a professor who said, I think we're going to throw you into broadcasting. And for somebody who couldn't speak in front of 5 people, I was terrified my whole life. I think I had 3 friends at best because that was the bandwidth of my social abilities. I wasn't sure about it, but I trusted them. You know, they saw me. They had been through the industry themselves, and so I thought maybe they know something I don't. And I'm forever grateful for that, obviously. So after graduating, I knew I wanted to be in sports, and live sports at that, but it's not a normal path to take, and so for me, I didn't think working at a news station would be a viable route to get to that. I found out that I was very wrong about that. It's actually the number one advice that I can give to people when they have a station offer is take it, because you can still get into live sports that way. You're there every day. You have a constant job. You're not having to worry at the end of the year if you have to find your next job or not. So it took me about a year and a half. I had a lot of false starts, some similar to the XFL startup leagues that tried to get going, and I got on board with that and thought, wow, we're a part of something new. And as you guys have seen, a lot of those startup leagues don't exactly get past the startup, and I was right back at square one as the time on my diploma became older and older, and I started to wonder if this was even a situation that I should be in anymore. Was I running out of time, still being somebody who was relevant with the information that I had? So I got very lucky. I ended up with a collegiate team out in Kilgore, Texas. It is exactly like Varsity Blues, if you've ever seen it. There is nothing going on. The stadium was built in 1947 out of repurposed oil rigs. We were working for free. It was usually 7 a.m. to 2 a.m., 7 days a week. And about a month and a half in, I thought, you know, I'm really not okay with this. I'm not myself. I'm miserable. And I called my parents and said, I think I'm done. And so I packed up everything I had overnight. I called everybody I knew, because it's June at this point. The season is already underway, and just said, look, if you need somebody so much as to flip hot dogs at your stadium, I will be there if it means I can finish the season in a ballpark and around other people that I can continue to network and put myself out there. And a good friend of mine who I bartended with called me and said, you know what, we just got rid of the person who was doing our on-field hosting. If you want to come to Mobile, Alabama, and you can finish the season here with us. And he gave me everything. He made me more than just the on-field host. He put me in the booth. We were doing everything else too. We had sales, social media, the whole 9, but I was actively involved in a group that wanted to put me out in front and wanted to see me and what I could do for them. It was not just a singular role. So I stayed there for a season and a half, and was told after that if I wanted to come back for the 2016 season, I would be sales only. And that didn't really work for me. I'd had plenty of sales job opportunities, and it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And that kind of showed me that even with everything I gave them, and I had a sales role as all of these other roles for them, and I broke sales records doing that part-time, but nobody was going to fight for me the way that I fought for myself. It didn't matter everything else that I gave somebody. If I wasn't going to sit there and back myself up, nobody was coming to save me at that point. So I walked away. I started over again, started calling different people, started trying to figure out what my next step was. Several times I packed up my car, drove from Atlanta to Phoenix, Arizona for an opportunity with the Fall League. Had never been there before, didn't know anybody out there, didn't really know what it was about. That became a home for 4 years. Had different things pop up with the ACC. when North Carolina had the controversial bathroom bill, ACC pulled out all of their championships from North Carolina, and all of a sudden their tennis was being held in North Georgia, which is half an hour from my home. And I got a call, and he said, hey, a friend of mine told me you covered tennis, so we need a courtside reporter next week. I played tennis. Not well. I tried. I was, it's a very competitive sport in Georgia, and so I just said, okay. And I sweated to death on the inside, and I spent the next 4 days that I had before the event started Googling everything, watching everything that I could on YouTube, asking people who I did know were collegiately competitive, hey, can I ask you a stupid question? Because you'd rather show that weakness on the back end of things and in your preparation than when you get to that big moment and you have to present this and they find those holes, they find those flaws in your preparation and your work. And so you have to be willing to be stupid, basically. But it worked. It was a 4-day event, and they really enjoyed working with me. So they said, hey, can you do track and field next week? I'm not athletic, and when I say that, I'm not underselling it. I'm not fast. I have nothing. And so once again, I said, yeah, I'll do track and field, thinking, what am I supposed to ask outside of, hey, you were the fastest one in this group. How did that feel? And once again, thank you, technology, just poured over different events, read the full 154-page NCAA manual on all of the rules, the disqualifications, the specifications for every different event, just making sure if there was anything to be questioned on that I had it. And after that, they said, okay, so a year from now, and I thought, okay, I've got time to prep for this one. They said, can you do swimming and diving? I can doggy paddle, but sure. So I had, once again, a chance to sit down and work. And that started a relationship with the ACC network that I enjoyed for several years until, of course, COVID removed most of those side reporting roles for different broadcasts. But from there, I just started building. And it was pieces like that that brought in different freelance opportunities for me. Again, I mentioned the Arizona Fall League. And finally, I got to get back into affiliated baseball on a more full role in 2018. I ended up with the AA Frisco Rough Riders in Texas. And it was different. The average minor league ballpark has a front office staff of maybe 12. They have a front office staff of 65. So we had one job and one job only, which was a new phenomena. But once again, it wasn't like it was all sunshine and daisies. You still had tarp pulls. You still had moments of questioning yourself. And it came early for me. It was the first time I was allowed to really be around the team. In Mobile, I was not allowed in the clubhouse. I was not allowed on the bus. I was not allowed to speak to our players unless we were actually filming an interview, which is very hard to build a relationship with somebody if you're not allowed to speak to them at all. And Mitch Haniger, who was one of our outfielders at the time, went to my broadcast partner and he said, why does she hate us? Why does she not want to talk to us? And he said, you just don't get it. She can't. So to have that chance to speak to people and to have those relationships in Frisco was new. But then again came the back end of things, and it was our first trip. We had a 12-hour bus ride to Corpus Christi, Texas, which is just a delightful ride. And some fans went up to our front office apparently while we were on this road trip and said, it's not a good look to have a female on a bus. We're 30 professionals, so what's not the good look? And I got taken off of road trips through nobody's true fault. It's not that my front office doubted me, but it was things like that I had to work through once again. I thought I'd be back in 2019, only to find out 2 weeks into spring training, so we were already into baseball, that they were making budget cuts, and I was the cut. And I panicked again. And sometimes fate has those moments of stepping in, because once again, I let everybody know that I was looking, that I would go anywhere I needed to go. It didn't matter if it was rookie ball or if we were going to be traveling across the country. And a good friend of mine, Emma Tiedemann, said, hey, I think you need to check in with this little team in Salem, Virginia, because they had just hired a broadcaster 2 weeks ago, and he's just now accepted a different job in Corpus Christi, Texas. And so I called immediately, looked up who the general manager was, looked up who their media people were, and said, look, you need to hire me for this. I'm already in Florida. I will give you all of the Red Sox coverage you want for these guys. I will do whatever you need me to do to get this job, but I will be that job for you. And fortunately enough, they said, sure. And it was the first time I had a general manager who didn't ask me, well, as a female, how would you handle this? Or as a female, how, and it was just, you're qualified. When can you be here? What do you want from us? You have this job as long as you want to have this job, which is another thing in this industry, why I support going to news stations if you have the opportunity so much, because it's really not fun living your life 7 months at a time in minor league baseball, trying to figure out where the next opportunity is once this one inevitably ends. And they were wonderful. And every team that I've had has been wonderful. The athletes themselves have almost rarely been the issue for me. They want to share their stories. If you're willing to be a human, and it's not just about, hey, you went 3 for 4 today, or hey, man, your QBR was way down this afternoon. What was it? Talk to them about their lives. Bring their families, their friends. Hey, I saw you got a new puppy. And they light up because they want to be human. We got into this period in the late 90s of really putting athletes on pedestals, and it was production, and it was the flash, and we had some of the best athletes across every major sport to really kind of give us that. And unfortunately, what it did though was it also pulled the fans a little bit back. They don't know what it's like to make $300 million. They don't know what it's like, to be able to get that jump shot at the perfect time, but they do know what it's like to lose your mom. They know what it's like to live out of your car sometimes, and athletes have a surprising number of stories that are just like that. And so having that ability to work through and bring that out led to this moment with the Orioles. I had had 12 previous major league interviews, and ironically with the Orioles, I didn't know I was being interviewed. I thought it was just a getting to know you. Salem was geographically close. If they needed somebody to fill in, I could do that. I'd been told in the past that I needed to choose. It was play-by-play or sideline reporting, but it would never be both. So I thought, okay, well, no, I'm going to do both. I'm not supposed to be here in the first place, according to a lot of people, so I'm going to do both. Going through some of those interviews, it was, well, you're not the right ethnicity that we're looking for this market. Or we're just looking to hire a male in his mid-40s. All things that have been said to me. Or my favorite, which I had probably half a dozen times, we just want a blonde. Well, I've never dyed my hair, and quite frankly, that thought is terrifying. So I thought eventually, and I had people who backed me up and said, somebody's going to hire you, and you're not going to have to change those little things that don't affect your job to be where you're supposed to be. And I could truly say, after every no that I had received, I could look back on the year that I had instead, and the growth that I had, and the things that I learned made me so grateful, because it just made me that much more solid when I got to that level of participating with the big leagues. You don't want to go up there and find out you're not ready. It's such a harder fall with such less grace when you realize you probably should have had, a little more understanding here. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of things that I'm still learning along the way, and texting people going, so where's lunch? I mean, just the basic stuff. What do I wear when we're getting on the bus or if we're on the plane, which, thank you, COVID, we haven't had to deal with that anyway. But coming into this, they said, hey, let's chat for a little bit over a Zoom. I thought, okay, not a big deal. I was talking to a couple other teams. I was excited moving forward. Went up, had lunch. Okay, cool. This is a neat group. They seem to be on the same page with what we both see philosophically about the game and broadcasting. And then I got an email that said, so we're thinking 140 games. And I about fell out of my chair, because for the first time in my life, I could finally pay my bills on time. So I said yes, without a doubt. I had a couple others in the mix, and they weren't going to make a decision for a couple more weeks. And I just said, look, I can't keep them waiting that long. They were here first. They want to use me for everything. Being a digital contributor, being a sideline reporter, being a play-by-play announcer. And it was that moment of realizing that not only was I going to be able to do all of the different paths that I'd fallen in love with about bringing sports to people, but it was also a little bit of that minor league background, because you had to do everything to keep the job. And it's been very fortuitous since then, and it's not without its ups and downs. I think the best thing that I had ever been told was the last winter meetings we had. Jesse Agler with the Padres said, look, when you get the dream job, the problems don't go away. You don't live a golden life. You're still human, FYI. And I thought, oh, okay. And I had no idea that a couple months later I would actually get to climb up to that level and realize exactly what he was talking about. But I think having that understanding right away that you're still going to go through some stuff. You're still going to have frustrations. It was a very welcome moment just to know that I hadn't gotten so high of, oh, I've made it here. Everything's going to be perfect from here on out. We're good to go. And it's not. But the other half of that is you choose the problems you have in life. Nobody's life is problem-free. But I love my job. So what I chose for the longest time was long hours and little pay. I chose those problems, though, and I welcome them time and time again to be able to cover a no-hitter, to be able to go and stand on the football sidelines and watch teams make incredible comebacks. Or in some cases, we had historical games just canceled, which hadn't happened since World War II. So you have to go forward from this, understanding that you are going to choose the problems that you have in this industry, but for all of the beautiful things that come from this job, it is so worth it to not give up on yourself. And at the same time, if you start to have that voice while you climb through this that says, you know, I just don't think this is it, listen to it, because torturing yourself for something you're not 100% sure on isn't good for anybody. And we've told so many people that aren't even in this. I mean, we've talked to realtors about this of, hey, look, if you're killing yourself over this and it's just not speaking to you at the end of the day, why waste your time trying to pursue a career which is going to be the bulk of your life if it doesn't absolutely speak to you? This is the first year I haven't had to work multiple jobs. I was a substitute teacher for 5 years. I was a bartender from age 15 until a year and a half ago when I could finally tell all my regulars I had had my entire life that they were going to have somebody else pour their happy hour beers, that I was finally done with this. But you found ways to make it work. Every little small job possible. I was a cable runner at several different broadcasting events just because it was an extra $100 and I didn't have anything in my schedule that day. But I had rent in a week, and so that was going to help me with that. So if you're willing to get creative and really dig it out, live with 4 different roommates in a 1-bedroom apartment, but know at the end of the day that even in those bad moments, you can find the one thing that sparks you, that brings you joy. That's what matters. That's what you should stick to while you're trying to find your way in this industry. And the one thing that I've done over the last 5 years is I've kept a notebook. I don't journal. I don't really have the time or the bandwidth by the time I get in bed to write a letter to myself about my day. But I do write one sentence on one thing that made me happy, even if it was just, Duncan got my coffee order right. And it gives you that little moment to look back and say, okay, we can build on this from tomorrow and move forward. But while it's not glittering in gold, don't give up, because it is worth it if you are willing to put in the work and you are willing to absolutely sell yourself, because you will have friends, you will have your parents, you will have your other family members tell you multiple times, odds are, hey, I think it's time we look at something else. Have you thought about public relations? Have you thought maybe about going into teaching? I know we told you not to because it doesn't pay, but we found out you picked a job that pays less. Have you thought about teaching? And at the end of the day, if you're willing to stick to here, you're not going to be stopped. You really aren't. And I'd love to take questions from you guys about absolutely anything on your mind. They usually aren't. Absolutely. Yeah, so to each their own, first of all. And I know you guys have heard this before, but it's, you don't want to try to be Vince Scully. There's already a Vince Scully. You don't want to be Maria Taylor. There's already a Maria Taylor. For me, I have filled that time with personal anecdotes because that's what speaks to me. So I've never had a winning team, by the way, and I don't know if you've paid attention to the Orioles the last 2 years, but yes, they have continued my minor league trend here. So for me, it's been getting to know them personally. So we had the Salem Red Sox in 2019. We had the oldest team in the league. We had several guys who were 26, 28 years old, and then we had guys who were 18 and 19. It was the weirdest but kind of coolest hodgepodge that I'd ever been around in baseball. And we had an indie ball pitcher. He'd been playing throughout the minors for 10 years. He'd never made it to the bigs. But he had so much, and it was just, again, willing to sit down and humanize him and showing up, too. Being at the batting cage behind the turtle, being in the dugout, being on the bus with my headphones off, willing to listen to guys, sitting out, doing my game notes in the hallway at 2 a.m. while they're playing Call of Duty down the hall. Obviously respecting boundaries, especially with coaches. Some coaches are very particular about where they do and don't want people. But the guys started to learn that they could come up and they could talk to me about things. Usually it was, I think my girlfriend's mad, what did I do? Or it was, hey, my mom's birthday is next week and I don't know what to get her. But it's just anywhere you can find a base. So for this kid, he had pitched an indie ball and he lived in a condemned house in New Mexico for 2 years. He went to Australia and he pitched there for a year, and he learned how to become a professional chef in Australia. And getting to bring out those moments to fans, I think we were staring at a franchise worse, which was dating back to 1954 record. But I got to bring that out, and I actually had a phone call from his mom the next day in tears. 10 years he had played baseball, and they had never had a broadcaster talk about him away from the field and what else he had to bring to the table other than his pitching record. And that kind of, those moments are what are going to stick with you over time, is those emotional connections, the people who really reach out and let you know that what you gave them resonated with them. That's how you build fans in any sport. And obviously some sports are different. Some sports are a little harder. They're more fast-paced. I can't work anecdotes into volleyball. But when you're showing people that you're willing to empathize with them, that's what fans attach to, because they remember those moments of, I was 5 years old, and you always hear it, and I met so-and-so, and he was the greatest guy. That's an emotional connection. No one goes, yeah, and he hit a double, and that's why I come back every day. So if you can build those and take the time to step out with that, I mean, even if it's this year, we had so many guys through the pandemic who either got engaged, married, or had a baby. You can tell time off from sports is very beneficial for your family life. And so even just those small moments of, hey, here comes Tanner Scott out of the bullpen. And by the way, congrats to him. He and Maddie just got engaged. And their 1-year-old Labradoodle came out with the ring, and it was great. That's what can really help fill those little periods. The less you make it about the overall record, the better off you are. But you have to bring the enthusiasm every day. Don't oversell it. You don't want people listening like, he sounds like he's calling the American League clincher and this team has 2 wins and we're in July. That's a lie. But you still have to be able to keep your emotions up. You still have to be just as excited to come back every day. And I'll tell you too, they're not supposed to listen, but the athletes and coaches will hear how you call games. And when they hear that you're not falling asleep, you're not selling it as only a 2-win team, they appreciate that. And it goes a long way, again, back into building those relationships with them. They're going to be more willing to talk to you about stuff. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, so most of my mentors are men, obviously. I would not be here today without some of the wonderful people in my life who have supported me. Um, I didn't really have a lot of females, and I had no females that had come through the minor league side of things to understand what I could and couldn't do. So from the start, I had been told it was a league policy, which the irony being that our league president was a female, that we simply didn't have access. We were not allowed as women into the clubhouse, on the bus, anything. So I paid out of pocket. I drove my own car. I paid to go on away games, and I got up at 6 a.m. every day on those away games. I made my sales goals for the day, and then I would go and drive over to the ballpark out of the hotel that I had paid for that was separate from the team hotel, just to get reps in, just to be able to call the game itself. And I didn't really think about it at the time as some big injustice. There certainly wasn't a highlight on that yet. But I am so grateful now that I do have a group of core women, and there are 7 of them in the minor leagues right now, and we can all bounce stuff off of each other, and we can all tell each other things that are and aren't acceptable. Maybe if I had known that back then, things would have been a little different, but at the same time, you can't change your own journey. And it just taught me, if anything, to appreciate more how important it is to have those connections and to have that access. Because again, the guys weren't really keen to talk to somebody when the perception was she didn't want to talk to them. At the same time, though, we had upper executives, and again, credit to my broadcast partner, Justin Baker. They told him for a year and a half that I didn't need to be in the booth. And when he said, why? And he said, present your argument, present your reasons for taking her out of the booth. They didn't have anything. It was just me being a woman calling the game that did not sit right. And he fought tooth and nail and ultimately probably cost him his job to keep me in there. And credit to him, he didn't tell me that until I got the Orioles job. He was one of the first people I called, and he said, you know, I have to tell you something now about that time way back in Mobile. And it blew my mind. You know, I knew that I had had a little bit of adversity against me. I had executives who didn't behave the way they probably should have. We had a sales director who would follow me home and take photos of my car because he thought I was out doing what I shouldn't with players. But you lean on your inner circle to death, because especially for us who take that unorthodox path through this, there's a very small group that's going to understand the actual struggles and the actual setbacks that you go through. But having them to kind of keep you going when you really, really don't want to go at all, that's what mattered. It didn't matter that I didn't have access back then. It's the fact that I kept going. And it didn't really matter what they were going to do. And now the team's not there. So I'd like to say I won that one, but anybody else? Yeah. It's so tough because, you know, my timing was really great. I got this job and I've dreamed of the major leagues because you get the chartered flights and the good food and the hotels that don't make you fear for your safety, and the beautiful cathedral ballparks. And then COVID kind of took away all of those things. So we've called from our booth in Camden Yards. Our pregame studio, when I flipped to the TV side of things, is in Camden Yards. So it's been Stairwell B every day this year for every game, up to either one of those 2 booths to call these games, whether the team is there or not. It's wonderful getting to be a part of something bigger, knowing that you're reaching a bigger audience, that especially, again, with a bad team, you have that challenge to continue to bring people back and remind them maybe why they grew up loving the Orioles and why they should still be coming back now to loving them. But for the most part, I'm still waiting, I think, to enjoy the things that I know are ahead. And the biggest one really is having the chance to actually talk to our guys outside of Zoom or Instagram lives or, you know, YouTube sessions, because it just brings you another level. You know, I can't really ask the casual questions if we have a scrum over Zoom because you're taking up everybody else's time with you, and our writers have deadlines. But it's been an opportunity nonetheless, especially again to have a multi-platform role with them and to show that I can show up every day and it doesn't matter where you want me, TV, radio, social media, to be there and to give that much more of a connection to fans, that they know that they have that one face across every platform where they go, okay, she's with the Orioles, instead of this rotating cast and crew of, well, do you know who it is this week, or do you know who this person is that's showing up today? And granted, that happened a lot the first couple weeks with the shutdown because fans hadn't really met me yet, and that was most of the comments when we would do live videos was, who is this girl? Why is she talking to the players? How does she even know? And I kind of want to be like, hey, I got hired, but then we shut the season down, so it's fine. You'll get to know me eventually. But yeah, there's so much ahead that I look forward to. If anything, it's been very fortuitous for me, again, financially, to finally be able to take care of myself and to give back to my parents, because I was on my own. 16 on, I didn't have help from them. I think one time I called my dad and I said, I never wanted to ask you for money, but I've blown out a tire on the side of the highway. I'm in Arkansas and I do not have money. Can you send me money so I can get a tire? And just knowing that that was kind of finally behind was nice. Because full transparency, 2019, I made $900 a month before taxes. I don't think I had ever met poverty level until I got this job. But again, you pick the problems that you're willing to put up with. And for me, it was scraping, it was eating ramen, again, living with 4 or 5 people. We had a 1-bedroom and we had air mattresses and pull-out couches and the whole nine. But, they're also at the same time some of the best memories, even though it was a little tough at times. Yeah. Do I what? Oh. With an Orioles player specifically is tough because I think there's a few I still haven't really gotten to talk to yet. And individually, I haven't really had many of them sit down with me. It's usually just a Zoom, and so we're round robining it, and you get one question. I will say, so my favorite is the call-up stories, just because it's the minors. I've been there, I've done that, and so when you finally see a guy and his name finally gets called, you know what it feels like. And so that's usually my question is, tell us the call-up story. Because you get some guys who are jokesters, and they'll pretend that a guy's about to get released, and then they'll go, I'm just kidding, you're going to the big leagues. And then you've got others that are straight up. Maybe they know this guy, he's had a little more struggle, and they want to be sensitive to that and just let him know. So this year, it was Spencer Watkins. He had been with Detroit for 10 years. Was a guy who was about to quit during COVID and go back and coach high school ball in Arizona. And his wife said, give it another year. So he signed the minor league deal with the Orioles. And when he got called up, I'm usually held after our writers to ask a question. And so usually by then, they've taken all the questions I want to ask, and no one had asked him, how did you find out? This is a 30th round pick. He had less than a 6% chance of making it to the big leagues, which, by the way, the league average is 10% to ever see the big leagues. 60% if you're a first rounder. You have a failing odd as a first rounder to make it to the big leagues. And I just said, Spencer, tell us a story. And he broke down in tears and just told us everything about almost quitting. And he thought he would be the guy with Detroit, and Detroit didn't work out, and how he ended up in Baltimore and still didn't think it would work out there. And again, it's those moments for me, those human connections where it feels like I had really done my job. We did, during the shutdown last year, a lot of Instagram lives with the players, just as a chance to kind of bring them out to fans since we didn't have baseball. And I knew that John Means' wife, Caroline, she was a retired professional soccer player, one of the coolest people I've ever met. But the two of them were so actively involved in charities, and they had actually miscarried before becoming pregnant with their now son, McCoy, and she was very open about that. And I just found it was something that people didn't really talk about, and it was kind of this taboo situation, and instead we were in a culture trying to change that and let, families know that it was okay to experience those things. And so the Orioles okayed it to have both of them on this live, not just John. So we chatted baseball for a little bit with him, and then we brought the two of them in. And just seeing them light up and getting to share that moment and talk about how fun it was now to have the healthy pregnancy with McCoy and what they were expecting to have this first season with a baby and coming back into things, and their thoughts on only having a 2-month season and then they could go right back to being a family. It was just a really cool 30 minutes that probably could have gone on a lot longer. But I haven't gotten to have anything super fun yet. I mean, obviously the no-hitter would have been great, but they were in Seattle and we were in Baltimore. So we just kind of watched, and we all yelled in our silent ballpark, the 10 of us, and went on from there. But yeah. Yeah. comments aside on some things, because I can't speak on those, but I think it's an individual choice. For me, I was a kid, and I grew up in SEC country, and I loved football. And for whatever reason, though, I loved baseball. I wanted to know every little detail about everything, and that's why I ended up pursuing that overall. I grew up just outside of the East Cobb complex, and so it was a way of life for us. It was year in and year out. I mean, they had 20 teams filtering out every single day. So that's why I chased it. And I didn't really care what anybody else had to say about it. I mean, the memory still burned in my head for me. I had two. And it was Bo Jackson over the wall with Kansas City. And my first game at Fenway, I grew up a Red Sox fan, sorry. But my family's from Boston, and they took all the boy cousins to Fenway every game, and we stayed at home. So I was 24, and we had a wedding coming up in Boston, and I called a couple of our colleagues with the Diamondbacks, and I said, I can't afford it, but do I have any way of getting to go to a Red Sox game? They're going to be home. Well, Wade Miley was there, and so they set it up, and I got to take one of my girl cousins with me, and we went to this game, and Big Pappy had a monster shot, just destroyed Lansdowne, and those kind of sit with you, and so for other people it is other sports. For me, I can't touch soccer and basketball. I've tried. I had one very, very poor soccer match that I called in college, and it wasn't even supposed to be me. The other guy got sick. I was on a run and literally showed up in my sweatpants and had to call this because we had nobody else. And I grew up too with a Czech grandmother who always said, why is it baseball? Soccer is the world's sport. You don't need to be in baseball. That's not for you. And I said, okay, well, it's mine. I don't think it's dying. Is it at a period of reimagination? Yes, but you also have to look at the timeline compared to a lot of other sports and the way they've evolved. Have we had football around for a long time? Yes. But you also think about it too in those different terms, that it started out just collegiately, and the professional realm itself too has morphed so much over time that it's had that constant change. So it's that constant reimagination that brings people back. Okay, now it's the NFL. Now they're all together. Okay, now we've got this. And then of course earlier, before the most recent attempt, okay, now the XFL might be a competitor. Let's see how this goes. You've got Canadian football. You've got arena football. Baseball's been the same for forever and ever until the end of time, with the exception of obviously a couple rules that started to curtail it from the 4 and 5 hour 900 run games that they used to see 200 years ago. And I think that's really what it comes down to. Do we probably need to tweak a few things in terms of salary floor, salary cap? Maybe. Most of the North American major sports had put that in place a long time ago. But it's up to you if you choose to broadcast baseball. Really, if you choose to broadcast any sport. I've done rugby, and it's a matter, again, earlier of selling it. And you don't want to be over the top. You don't want to be gimmicky. You don't want to be a carnival barker about it. But put your heart in it and keep that emotion up. Keep people going. Even if you're kind of, chugging coffee in the background between every inning, give them a reason that comes back. And don't be afraid either, too, and I should have added this earlier, to let them see a little bit of you. You don't want to make it about you. You don't want to bring it so much into the broadcast that they're like, okay, what are we listening to? But Jeff Arnold, my broadcast partner, and I, he knows, and we bring it openly all the time. He goes, oh, here's another dad joke. She's got another dad joke to bring to the table. Or I bring a big cooler bag every day to the ballpark because I'm a hungry hippo. And he'll go, okay, what's in the snack bag today? And if it's a particularly slow game, he'll have me pull everything out of this. And he's like, what is this? And we just have fun with it. But you can be yourself. You can bring personality out over the airwaves. And I think as long as you're taking that step to make it personal and give it that touch, that's really with any sport. That's where you keep bringing people back. But if you continue that trend openly of saying, oh, well, this is a dying sport, I don't know if you know that, that's when people go, okay, well, if he thinks it's a dying sport, then why should I tune in to hear him talk about it? And certainly, again, you can talk about it amongst the industry, and we can certainly be aware of the realities of situations. But the minute that you let people know that you're fully invested into what you're doing, that's why they come back, because it shows 110% if you are kind of 1 foot out the door with anything. Yeah. Inner circle. And it's men and women. But I have two girlfriends in particular. One is in New York, one's in California. You'll have a lot of friends, by the way, that don't live anywhere near you. I have like no friends near me at all, which I get teased about all the time. But we text each other. When I tell you it's nonstop, almost 7 days a week, even if it's just the most random thing. One of them the other day was like, I went and got pizza at the bodega and it was great. And having them to lean on is huge. And we have had moments calling each other of just, I can't do this anymore. I'm not getting paid enough, or I can't pay my bills. You know, I had a really bad day, or somebody was ugly towards me at work, and they're the ones who keep telling you, no, you have to keep showing up. And then it turns around because they have those moments, and we've done the same thing back to them in reverse. But overall, I feel fortunate, honestly, because most of the male colleagues I've had, with the exception of maybe two in the 11 plus years that I've done this, have been great. And I think, too, when you're willing to kind of set aside and you push out the noise of like, oh, she's a female, and they do this rah-rah publicity about it, and you just, I'm here to work, and I'm here to do the same level of work as everybody else, if not better. That's when they go, okay, so we get it. She's here to do the job. And I can safely say, even, so this year we had 8 people on our staff with the Orioles. In 2020, we had 21 broadcasters. More than the team, almost. And every single one of those men were fantastic. And they were also willing to, when I talk about asking stupid questions while you're prepping for things, they got it. That I was willing to kind of put my humility aside if I just truly didn't get what happened. And we have seen some bizarre stuff happen this year. That I just wanted to be in a place that I could learn, and a place that I could get better. And my favorite, too, and ask people, hey, can you listen to my stuff? Can you tell me where I can get better? Can we watch this together and help me get better? Because right now we're in a situation where men are a little gun shy to give us that advice, because, you know, some people do construe it the wrong way, and, you know, oh, how, you know, he's telling me this just because I'm a female. But if you're letting them know that, hey, I need to get better, and the only way to do that is when other people can help me see where I can get better. My favorite is I park at the ballpark every day at the same time as Jim Palmer. He's a Hall of Famer. He is a walking Rain Man. He can tell you any pitch sequence against any batter he's ever faced in his entire career, the weather, the person sitting in the second row, and he just doesn't care. And my favorite thing about that is we'll park at the same time, and we get out of the car and we look across the parking lot at each other, and he'll walk up and he'll go, "Are you ready for me to tell you what you did wrong yesterday?" And it just makes me laugh, because yes, you're a Hall of Famer. I want to know. Tell me what you want me to improve upon. And he's not afraid to do that, but you do have to be willing to tell people, I really need it, because they're going to be a little less willing to come to you and offer that advice, you know, free of ask. But no, you really build that inner circle. It helps, obviously, if they are in an industry or a similar industry, because we have very unique situations, I think, that a lot of people outside aren't really going to understand, especially when it comes to the work schedule. I've missed so many birthdays, funerals, celebrations, holidays, everything, that a lot of people don't understand. But it's nice when you're sitting at an airport on Christmas Day because you're flying out to go cover a football game, and you get to text your other friends who are also at other different airports, and it's, you know, like, hey, I didn't get to open the last present that I really wanted to see, or, you know, I'm so tired and it's 6 a.m. and I've got to be up at 2 and I've got to do this, and they're what keep you going at the end of the day. You still have to believe in yourself, and you still have to sell yourself, but having those who you can commiserate with and understand are huge. And to be honest, I've met most of them on social media. We have like the tightest, they'll probably be my bridesmaids eventually, and I've only met a handful of them here and there, but it's the only way we can have those relationships, because the odds of us being in the same city are just so small.
So like earlier in your career, before, let's say you had a Hall of Fame broadcaster, what was your process like for self-critiquing?
I didn't really do a lot of self-critiquing, just because I was so green at all of it that, you know, I couldn't listen to my own stuff and tell you. There were obvious things that you can obviously pick out. I had a really bad habit for a long time, and I've heard it from a lot of people. You'll pick one word not intentionally, but your brain's like, hey, I like this one word, so let's say it every other sentence. And so you'll listen back and you'll go, okay, I gotta get that out of my vocabulary. Like we're done with that for the day. But it was going out and finding people who were willing to take the time. And again, going back to my partner in Mobile, he actually was very proactive about it. And so we would finish a broadcast. He'd go, hey, okay, let's listen back tomorrow morning to tonight's game, and let's go through some stuff and let's talk about it. And two, just with two of the biggest mentors probably in my life are Bob Rathbun, who's with the Atlanta Hawks, and Tim Brando, who's with CBS. And again, two wonderful men who I know I can really go to at any point. And every now and then they'll also offer and say, hey, I listened last night and I just had a couple notes for you. And I mean, I'm stopping everything and going, all right, let me get either my notepad on my phone or let me find my agenda and I can write it in the footnotes there. I've just found, though, that when you're trying to listen to yourself, which I think is everybody's least favorite activity to ever do, I hate my own voice. Like I don't listen back to any video, broadcast, anything by myself willingly. But it is the only way to get better. And just having them being willing to sit down and take the time. And two, even with my partner in Baltimore now with Jeff, he's the unfortunate one. We were both in the Carolina League together in 19, and Mike Farron, who was with the Diamondbacks, called him and he said, hey, this girl's coming and you have to be nice to her because she's one of my friends since I did so much minor league work for them. And so when we would play each other, which was more than any other team that year, oddly enough, he was always very kind enough to say, hey, do you want to sit down while we're in the middle of these 4 or 5 days and we'll go get lunch or we'll go get dinner and let's listen to some of this, because he had been in longer than I had. He had more constructive broadcast partners than I had ever had, to where there were things that I had been missing for years. I had guys who would say, you're not connecting. You're delivering when the pitch is coming home, but then there's a misstep between when the ball is put in play. But that's all they would say, and I was like, how do I connect that? Here's the 3-2, double down the right field line. And it was Jeff who finally said, just say swing. He swings. That's all you need to connect it. And it was just like this, duh, how did I miss it moment? But again, having somebody who had been around enough, who had done the work enough to be able to explain that to me and break it down. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. And for a long time, I didn't feel deserving to tell my story, because you hear so many stories from people who say, oh, I always knew I wanted to do this. Well, again, I was an introvert. This was probably the last thing I was ever going to do. I grew up thinking I would be a veterinarian until I dissected a shark, and I dropped that one cold in 5th grade. And then I thought I'd be a teacher like my mom until I was getting ready to go to college, and she said over my dead body, will you ever be a teacher? And I thought, okay, I'll be a print journalist. And then they said, why don't you do broadcasting? So there were people over the years who I certainly paid attention to, and the late Jim Fife, who was the voice of Auburn University football. My dad went to Auburn, and I still remember him when I was growing up. And even if we were physically at the game, he had the old yellow Walkman radio headset on because he still wanted to listen to Jim's calls while we were there, because he had this way of coming through and connecting to fans and bringing them back in. And that kind of stuck with me, of noticing that I still even remembered some of his calls. And certainly, again, with Rathbun, just because he was one of the first people I connected with. Oddly enough, we adopted a dog through his wife, and that was the basis of the connection. But he's been like an uncle to me. I mean, really, all the way back since I was in college. And he had actually told me, baseball needs to be your primary sport. He said, you can do other stuff to fill in the gaps, but you're a baseball person. So he's another one. But what I've really enjoyed the most is, especially if we have a night game and there are always at least one day game going on, is pulling up a broadcast, especially if it's one I haven't listened to before, and just listening to the way that they call the game and taking notes. And sometimes, like, you'll even hear them use a certain word to describe something. Oh, like, I've never heard that before. And you write it down to kind of maybe incorporate in later. But there's so many, really, that come to mind. And obviously, again, Vin Scully, with the storytelling style, just really always spoke to me. But be willing to kind of put yourself out there and listen to anybody different that you can. I know Eric Nadel with the Rangers is just another absolutely phenomenal voice. But there's different voices that are always going to speak to you and that you'll resonate with. And when you're willing to kind of get yourself out there and open up a little bit and listen to different people, that's where you can kind of start building off of what they've already done and what they've already built.